Is anarcho-communism real communism or an oxymoron? Let's find out. Hello everyone, this is My Two Cents. I'd like to welcome back a crowd favorite and my elite level patron, Nightshift10000.
Hey, My Two Cents, back at it, are we?
I'm afraid so. Why don't you introduce the video we'll be debunking this time?
This video is about anarcho-communism, the worst of weaponized autisms. And I'm doing a little educating here because I was in a conversation with My Two Cents and a few others who'd never heard of Peter Kropotkin before. Not that he's a huge household name here in the West, but still. Plus, it never hurts to learn more about your foe's history. Also, side note, if you hear me laughing at the term anarcho-communism, I apologize in advance. It's hard for me to say that term without laughing a little.
But you're right to laugh. As we'll see, anarcho-communism is a total oxymoron. Government is a group of people with a monopoly on the use of force, and therefore could not exist in an anarchy. But communism is a society based on communal ownership of all means of production and the fruits of all labor. If someone decides to keep the fruits of their own labor or sell them at a profit in an anarcho-communist society, you're either going to use force to stop them or you aren't. If you are, you're not an anarchy. If you aren't, then you're in fact an anarcho-capitalist society.
There's one more thing I want to say, and that is that this video was my choice to do, and I'm also sorry if you or the audience can't understand half of what's being said. The guy doing the video sounds like he's got some kind of cognitive disorder. Well, besides anarcho-communism.
What a surprise. Let's get into it.
To quote the late great Peter Kropotkin in his works The Conquest of Bread, every society which has abolished private property will be forced to be maintained.
Forced to be maintained figures the first technical ANCOM would advocate for enforcing a system. Anarchy at its core doesn't stand for enforcing anything and relies on voluntary individual interactions for day-to-day cohesion. Don't laugh either, that's literally how anarchism is defined.
Yeah, he's not off to a good start.
To organize itself on the lines of communistic anarchy.
I'm sorry. It just gets me every time. Communistic anarchy.
Anarchy leads to communism, and communism to anarchy.
Oh, God. I didn't think I'd be talking this much this early, but anarchy leads to communism? How exactly does a system of disorder due to the absence or non-cognition of authority lead to a tyranny by majority like communism? Anarchy, if it happens, will lead to people interacting voluntarily with one another, trading goods and services. There will also be other forms of exchange, but they will all be voluntary in their natures if it is truly anarchy. The tyranny by majority that communism represents is still a form of government and state rule. So, no. Communism isn't anarchy at all, although you got the last part right. Communism leads to anarchy or a breakdown of authority in all forms, just like the collapses of revolutionary Catalonia and the Soviet Union.
Yes, Night Shift, you are absolutely right, but let's at least try to let him get a word in here.
Both alike being the expressions of the predominant tendencies in modern societies, the pursuit of equality. Personally, I identify as an anarchist communist, otherwise known as Anarcho-Communism. Some people think that we live in a world where we can live without one or the other, and I think that is foolish.
Then you obviously don't understand human cohesion or human nature. We as human beings are not collectivist. Even on a genetic level, humans are geared to be individuals with individual mindsets that want to be acknowledged for what we do individually. Communism forces people to collectivize even against their will. There's a reason communism has never worked and always usually devolves into socialism.
There's a reason that communism only sounds good to people as lazy as sloths, but sounds horrifying to anyone who's made any accomplishments through hard work.
In my opinion, both anarchism and communism need to be in place in order for a healthy society to prosper.
Funny. I've always said that our society would be much healthier if we all rode unicorns who fart rainbows instead of driving cars. But I kinda suspect there's a reason we're not doing that.
Now you just need examples of a healthy, long-lived society where communism has produced these results. Got news for you. You ain't gonna find one.
And today, we're going to explore that concept. Let's start with communism, the scary one that most people dig up Joseph McCarthy's grave for when they hear the word.
If a person consistently reads and advocates the views expressed in a communist publication, he may be a communist.
Actually, I agree that people shouldn't have been or ever be scrutinized for researching the concept of communism or communist history. What Joseph Raymond McCarthy did in the 1940s and 50s was unacceptable and unnecessary. I can say from personal experience of researching communism myself just how much it turned me against the concept of communism altogether.
I actually support the right of people to research and explore communism voluntarily if they want to. I encourage communists everywhere to pack up right now, come together, and form a voluntary commune. See for yourselves how it works on a small scale.
If a person supports organizations which reflect communist teachings, or organizations labeled communist by the Department of Justice, she may be a communist.
At its core, communism is the working class uniting together against capitalism and then organizing itself afterward to seize the means of production.
And that's open advocacy for the use of force on your part. You aren't an anarchist.
And that's basically it. Though the reason why the working class would overthrow capitalism is because the capitalist class has been stealing the fruits of the workers' labor with each surplus. The worker would completely be in charge of their own value and their work by removing the capitalist.
There is no such thing as surplus value. Marx's labor theory of value has been soundly debunked over and over again. See the link in the upper right-hand corner if you'd like to learn more. Marx himself actually delayed and ultimately never published his later editions of Das Kapital because he didn't know how to respond to criticisms of his own theory.
What you and other communists are describing is called corporatism, or the organization of a society into industrial and professional corporations served and or serving as political representation and exercising control over persons and activities within their jurisdiction with political backing or power. This is not capitalism, and communists like you need to stop conflating capitalism with corporatism.
You might be thinking, though, why should I care what a bunch of commies have to say about their bosses? They should just work. Well, you have to understand that the communist regimes in the past have only come into fruition because workers have been exploited by capitalists and monarchs. One such example is when the United States aided the Fulgencio Batista regime in Cuba. You have to understand that Batista was an authoritarian dictator that allowed the United States to do business there. By the late 1950s, U.S. financial interests owned 90% of Cuban mines, 80% of its public utilities, 50% of its railways, 40% of its sugar production, and 25% of its bank deposits, which is $1 billion in total. As payment, Batista accepted weapons from the United States for his military, such as planes, ships, tanks, and napalm. As many as 20,000 civilians were killed as a result of his rule. Of course, how could you blame Castro and his working class people for organizing and overthrowing the Batista regime?
And implemented a regime of tyranny just as brutal and oppressive, if not more so, than the previous regime that he replaced. Let's go over Castro's communist track record, shall we? A massive economic backlash, harsh repression of freedom of speech and expression, executing people for the most trivial of matters, such as dissent, limiting access to information. Let's see, is there anything I've missed?
Even if everything you've stated about Batista's regime and the US's involvement in it is true, it doesn't really help your case to point out that a communist revolution unseated him. Conditions got immensely worse for the Cuban people, not better, so you're going to have to explain why this won't happen a second time around.
Now, There are images of Joseph Stalin that come into people's minds, and that's partially due to the anti-communist propaganda that has been created, but some of it is valid. Joseph Stalin was an authoritarian that imprisoned people who disagreed with him. Marxist-Leninists will say that he imprisoned landowners from the previous regime, which is a good thing because they were capitalists, but he also imprisoned anarchists and communists, which is a bad thing because they were not capitalists.
It was a bad thing all around. The capitalists being talked about here were known as the kulaks, rich peasant farmers who were exempt from most taxes and other stipulations that were usually implemented on the Russians by the Tsar. But the Tsar tried something with many of the farmers. This experiment, which led to the kulaks' success, largely worked. The kulak farmers were able to buy more land, grow more crops, and produce more livestock, and hire people to tend the lands with them. During this time, Russia and most of Eastern Europe prospered like never before. Now, I know what people are going to say, that the kulaks caused a famine in the Ukraine. But the actual case of this was Soviet and communist collectivism, and the kulaks would rather have seen their crops burned and livestock destroyed rather than have all that they had worked for so hard stolen by collectivist communists and to have the fruits of their labors taken from them.
Check out my video on the economy of Tsarist Russia if you'd like to learn more. However, since you yourself have already advocated for armed revolution to achieve your communist society, my question is, how exactly are you going to stop someone like Stalin from coming to power once you're finished? This is a question Jordan Peterson has stated very eloquently.
And then when the Marxists say, well, that wasn't real Marxism, what it really means, and I've thought about this for a long time, it's the most arrogant possible statement anyone could ever make. It means, if I would have been in Stalin's position, I would have ushered in the damn utopia instead of the genocidal massacres, because I understand the doctrine of Marxism and everything about me is good. It's like, well, think again, sunshine. You don't understand it. You don't understand it. And you're not that good. And if the power was in your hands, assuming you had the competence, which you don't, you wouldn't have done any better. And even if you had, there would have been someone else waiting right behind you to shoot you the first time you actually tried to do anything good.
The thing you have to understand is that these types of communists are authoritarian communists, and part of their philosophy is that you need to organize the working class into a dictatorship of the proletariat.
Communism pretty much breaks down into that no matter what you do, because the instant you begin collectivizing communities and the products of that community's labors, you will instantaneously have the collective dictatorship of the proletariat simply as a tyranny by majority. That's why anarchism and communism are polar opposites. Anarchism means complete voluntary interaction. Communism means collective rule.
Usually by wealth they've stolen from capitalists and imperialists to exploit the people, which will supposedly wither away into a classless society. The problem is that it never does evolve into a classless society. It ends up getting more powerful into large plutocracies.
That is exactly the problem with communism and why it will never work. Society will never break down into being classless because class systems in the human species have existed since time immemorial.
And again, in your society, if someone decides to keep the fruits of their own labor or sell them for a profit, you're either going to stop them with force or you aren't. If you are, you're not an anarchy. If you aren't, then you're an anarcho-capitalist.
These authoritarian governments take so long creating resistances amongst their people, so they breed revisionists that end up undermining their system. It's a government that can be corrupted. That's the point.
Yes, another problem with anarcho-communism is you get pretty much the same thing happening. The collective can be corrupted, and you're leaving these decisions in the hands of the collective. You have to realize that anarchy and communism developed and materialized as two separate ideologies. When they were first conceptualized as ideologies, people couldn't decide how to make them work as one unified ideology. And as time went on, the two ideologies' definitions developed until they were just too differing to coexist. This is why anarcho-capitalism works so well, and why it makes sense that the ideology of anarchism would grow more synonymous with the ideology of capitalism, as both are defined as completely voluntary ideologies.
Which leads into my next point, which is why we need anarchism. Anarchism is inherently anti-authoritarian in nature. If the USSR was an anarchist communist society, there would be no Stalin, no Trotsky, no censorship, and no gulag.
An academic estimate to say the least. Anarcho-communism, again, is collective bargaining and collective decision-making of the whole community. Communism will always break down into the authoritarian rule of the proletariat. It can't ever be anarchist. Look, I'm not an idiot. I get it. When anarchism was first developed as an ideology, it was poor people realizing and spreading this ideology mainly against what they saw as capitalism. But that's where the traditional definition is flawed. The capitalism they hated is one that we anarcho-capitalists hate with just as much fervor, if not more. The ideology of corporatism.
Anarchism favors direct action and direct democracy.
And again, another problem. Democracy isn't anarchy. Democracy is mob rule and has nothing to do with anarchy.
A collective is slow and inefficient. No one has the time to vote on everything. This is why a totalitarian government will always emerge from any type of collective, democratic, whatever what you want to call it type of society. Heck, just look at the current form of the US government compared to what was envisioned by the Founding Fathers.
So the governing process would be completely leaderless and without dogma. That's why if we are to have communism, which I advocate as long as it's an authoritarian, it must operate completely decentralized. Each worker would be for their own, and autonomy would be very important.
Are you kidding me? You can't be serious, sir. No, autonomy goes completely against communist principles in all forms. Are you listening? Do you hear me right now? Autonomy is the antithesis of communism. Oh, God, that statement was so stupid I think I lost some brain functionality.
Yeah.
Peter Kropotkin also believed that each worker should have their basic means of survival, such as food, clothes, shelter, etc.
And how did he reason that that was going to happen exactly? Listen, from what I know of Peter Kropotkin, he was a Russian activist born in 1842. He organized protests and riots against capitalism all across Europe. He was basically one of the first SJWs, as he was born into royalty but rejected it for the plight of the people or whatever. He joined a society known as the Tchaikovsky Circle. He was arrested many times and died before he could see the horrors of Bolshevism unfold. And he obviously had no clue how to make his ideology work.
And in today's society, we have the technology, science, and knowledge to feed everyone according to Murray Bookchin, and doing so should be completely automated, with maintenance being to a minimal.
Wow. Okay, I largely agree with this. God, it's about time. But the only thing that is being left out here is that we have the technology, science, and knowledge to feed everyone on Earth because of capitalism and capitalist developments that includes industrial and agricultural automation. What Chris here isn't mentioning is that capitalism has increased human production, technology, and living standards 1,000-fold, even from standards 100 years prior to this. No other system has ever created such human development in history.
For those that would like to learn more, see my video, Can World Hunger Be Solved with Money?
Kropotkin wrote, "We see that the worker compelled to struggle painfully for bare existence is reduced to ignorance of these higher delights, the highest within man's reach of science and especially the scientific discovery, of art and especially of artistic creation. It is in order to obtain these joys for all, which are now reserved to a few, in order to give leisure and the possibility of developing intellectual capabilities that the social revolution must guarantee bread to all. After bread has been secured, leisure is the supreme aim.
And how, without enslaving others to produce said bread and crops, is this possible? The only way that the majority may live in luxury is through capitalism, as capitalism, unfettered and unaided by government, would produce the best standards of life. As we can see, even from living in a mere shell of this under welfare capitalism in our society, even the poorest in our society would be considered wealthy and bourgeoisie by the standards of billions of other human beings. Capitalism turns luxuries into necessities. Communism turns necessities into luxuries.
Despite how evil the corporatist American economy is in your eyes, why is it that people around the world are still flocking to the US, and not to places like North Korea, Cuba, and Venezuela?
What Kropotkin is saying is that the working class people could focus on creative works if they are free from exploitive works. Humans can focus on creating and innovating. If we focus on making technology more automatic, who knows how much more leisure the people can have? And don't think that it's not possible. Here's a quote from Murray Bookchin. There is no reason why the basic technological principles involved in cybernating the manufacture of automobile engines cannot be applied to virtually every area of mass manufacture, to the metallurgical industry, to the food processing industry, from the electronic industry to the toy making industry, from the manufacture of prefabricated bridges, from the manufacture of prefabricated houses. Essentially, when capitalism spends its money on senseless wars or making the city unlivable for the homeless and throwing out food out of grocery stores, it could be housing more people and feeding those homeless people. Or hell, we should be dismantling capitalism altogether.
Again, all things that government involvement and control, i.e. corporatism, is responsible for.
I'd love for you to explain how voluntary interactions in a free market result in wars. How many private corporations have ever declared war on another country? And it's government regulations that often force things like food getting thrown out to happen, since grocery stores might be subject to lawsuits if anyone ever got sick on a day-old food.
As Peter Kropotkin would say, all is for all. The capitalists have been brainwashing us into fighting each other. Rather, we need to be fighting the capitalists instead. That is why I advocate for anarchist communism.
Okay, how long do we have to go through this until these idiots get a clue? Anarcho-Communism doesn't and can't exist. Oh God, I can't go through this anymore. I think I'm just losing too many brain cells. Good God, I chose a real winner here. Holy things these ANCOM idiots actually believe. If this is what kids from the millennial generation believe in, then I've lost all hope for the future of humanity.
As I said in the video, I honestly want these guys to come together and form their own voluntary commune. No one is stopping you. See for yourselves how it works.
Actually, I might be being a little harsh. Check out this guy's video outro when he's recommending the books. He actually looks like he's developmentally disabled, thus being the perfect poster child for ANCOMs everywhere.
And for the record, that's not why he's wrong. His ideas stand or fall on their own merits. In this case, they fall hard due to lack of merit.
Dude, thanks for doing this and going with my choice of video topic. See you next time, bro.
You're welcome, and thank you for making my channel possible as an elite level patron. I'll see you again in a month for our next collab. And that's our 2 cents. So take it for what it's worth. Before I go, just a quick reminder to everyone about Christmas merch in the My 2 Cents Teespring store. This t-shirt will only be available until December 31st, so be sure to get yours now. Thanks everyone for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. And if you're a fan of my channel, please consider becoming a patron. For as low as $1 a month, you'll receive instant access to patron-exclusive videos, earn the right to participate in patrons-only live streams, have your name listed in the end credits of every video, and numerous other rewards. Be sure to check out my blog, my2centsvideos.com, and all other social media platforms as well. Uploads are every Thursday and Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, so stay tuned for more videos.